The phone vibrated like a beating drum, slicing through the silence of the apartment. Lena stared at it, heart thudding, hands trembling, though she already knew who it was from. Daniel. "We need to talk. Tonight, 8 p.m., my place." No emojis, no apologies, just that stark finality in the words. Lena's chest tightened. She had known this was coming. The cracks in their relationship had been there for months, but seeing it typed out made it impossible to ignore. The city outside the window carried on in its indifferent rhythm. Cars honking, people laughing, streetlights flickering against the dark. Inside, Lena felt like she had been put on pause, suspended in some cruel limbo between past and present. She tried to recall the last time they had really talked, not argued, not exchanged sharp-edged words, but talked. It was a Tuesday, a week ago, over lukewarm coffee in a tiny cafe by the river. Daniel had smiled, the way he always did when he was trying to hide something, and she had believed, stupidly, that maybe, just maybe, they could fix it. But tonight, she knew, the illusion would end. Lena slipped on her coat, grabbed her bag, and left the apartment, the autumn air biting at her cheeks. Every step toward Daniel's building felt like stepping into a story she wasn't sure she wanted to finish. When she arrived, he was already there, leaning against the hallway wall, arms crossed, his usual easy charm replaced by something tighter, controlled. "Lena, thanks for coming." She nodded, words stuck in her throat. She could feel the distance between them, not just the physical space, but something more profound, a chasm carved from months of disappointment, miscommunication, and fading affection. "Let's sit," he said, gesturing to the small couch. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Lena's mind raced. How do you begin when you know this is the end? Daniel finally spoke, the words deliberate, measured. "I don't think this is working anymore." It was simple, almost clinical, but to Lena it felt like a sledgehammer. Her throat burned, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. She opened her mouth, closed it again, tried to summon something to say. I I thought we could fix it," she whispered finally. He shook his head, a sad smile tugging at his lips. "Some things can't be fixed. We tried, Lena, we really did. But maybe we're just not right for each other anymore." And just like that, the world she had built around their love collapsed into fragments. Daniel's eyes searched hers, as if trying to find a spark of the person he had fallen in love with. Lena's gaze wavered, caught between the urge to run and the need to understand why it had come to this. "Do you remember our first night here?" Daniel asked, suddenly a faint tremor in his voice. "You complained about the cold, and I made you that terrible soup because I didn't know how else to, I don't know, make you feel at home." Lena forced a small smile, the memory sharp and bittersweet. "I hated that soup," she said softly, "but I guess I didn't hate the way you tried to care." He laughed quietly, but it was hollow. "We've had good times, Lena. Really good times. And that's what makes this harder." She nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. "It's not that we don't care. We do. But caring isn't enough anymore, is it?" "No, it isn't." They sat in silence for a long minute, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. It was the kind of silence that marked an ending, not a pause. Lena felt every heartbeat echo in her chest, each one a countdown she wasn't ready for. "I keep wondering," she said finally, her voice breaking, "if there was something I could have done differently." Daniel shook his head. "It's not on you, Lena. It's just us. Timing, circumstances, everything. We've changed. And maybe we've grown apart." The words felt like ice sliding down her spine.
She wanted to argue, to demand proof that love could conquer everything. But the truth was undeniable. They were two people who had once fit together perfectly, and now no longer did. Lena stood, her hands trembling. "I guess this is it then." Daniel stood too, stepping closer, hesitating as if afraid to cross some invisible boundary. "I don't want to hurt you," he said quietly, "but I know staying would hurt us both more." She nodded, unable to speak. And then, almost instinctively, they embraced, a brief, tight hug that carried years of laughter, arguments, shared dreams, and heartbreak. When they finally pulled apart, the weight of reality pressed down like a storm cloud. "Goodbye, Lena," Daniel whispered. "Goodbye, Daniel." And with that, she walked out into the night, the streetlights casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the emptiness she felt inside. Outside, Lena's legs carried her without direction. Every familiar street corner, every glowing window reminded her of what they had lost. The city, alive and indifferent, seemed almost cruel in its continuity, as if life expected her to move on without pause. Her phone buzzed again, but it wasn't Daniel. It was a message from her friend Sarah. "Hey, want to come over? You need someone tonight." She typed a quick yes and shoved the phone into her bag. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if she could ever love again. But for the first time since she left Daniel's apartment, she felt a flicker of hope, a small ember amidst the wreckage. She knew heartbreak was just the beginning.
The next morning, sunlight filtered through Lena's curtains, soft and intrusive. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the emptiness in the apartment echoing the emptiness inside her. For the first time in months, she wasn't waiting for a message from Daniel. The thought was both liberating and terrifying. She got up, made herself a cup of coffee, and sat by the window, watching people rush past on the streets below. Each face seemed so full of purpose, so certain in their motion, while she felt like a ghost drifting through her own life. Sarah's voice on the phone later that day was a lifeline. "Come over," she urged. "We can cry, rant, eat terrible ice cream, whatever you need." Lena laughed through tears, feeling the first spark of connection in days. She didn't realize how isolating the past months had been, how much she had relied on Daniel, not just for love, but for her sense of self. At Sarah's apartment, Lena found herself spilling everything. The phone message, the last conversation, the hug that had felt like both the balm and a wound. Sarah listened without interrupting, nodding, her presence steady. "You know," Sarah said finally, "this is your chance to rebuild yourself. Not as someone half of a pair, but as Lena. Your Lena." Lena stared at her friend, the words sinking in like seeds into soil. She wanted to resist, to tell herself it was too soon, too painful. But deep down, she knew Sarah was right. She had lost a relationship, yes, but she hadn't lost herself. The days that followed were a strange mix of routine and chaos. Lena went to work, answered emails, smiled at coworkers, but everything felt surreal. She walked past Daniel's favorite coffee shop, her stomach knotting with memories. She deleted old messages, photos, anything that tethered her to the past. Each deletion felt like tearing out a page of her life, leaving space for something new. One evening, Lena found herself at a small bookstore she had never noticed before. The scent of old pages and dust was comforting. She wandered the aisles aimlessly until a book caught her eye, a journal with a soft leather cover. On impulse, she bought it. That night,
Lena wrote her first words, raw and unfiltered. I don't know who I am without him, but maybe I'm about to find out. The act of writing became a ritual. Each night she poured her thoughts onto the pages, untangling memories, regrets, hopes, and fears. The journal became a mirror, reflecting not only what she had lost, but also what she might become. Weeks passed. Lena started to reclaim pieces of herself that had been buried. Her love for painting, long walks through the city, quiet afternoons with a cup of tea and a novel. She met new people, friends who made her laugh in ways Daniel hadn't, who reminded her that the world was bigger than a single heartbreak. One evening, while walking home, Lena noticed a street musician playing a hauntingly beautiful melody on a violin. She stopped, letting the music wash over her. A man nearby smiled at her, and for a moment their eyes met, not as strangers, but as two people sharing a fleeting connection in the vastness of the city. It was nothing serious, nothing permanent, but it stirred something inside her, a recognition that life continued, that joy could still exist, even after pain. Lena's phone buzzed one night with a message from Daniel. She froze, her fingers hovering above the screen. Hope you're doing okay. I think about you sometimes. She stared at it, a wave of old emotions crashing over her. Sadness, longing, anger, tenderness. But this time, she didn't respond immediately. She put the phone down, walked to the window, and watched the city lights flicker. For the first time, she realized she didn't need closure from him. She had closure within herself. She had survived the heartbreak, faced her loneliness, and started to grow in ways she hadn't expected. And that was enough.
Lena's journal began to fill quickly, page after page of emotions that had no other place to go. Some entries were a storm of words, scribbled with shaking hands after a long day of pretending she was fine. Others were neat, thoughtful, almost calm, like she was writing letters to a future version of herself. But healing wasn't linear. One Saturday morning, while sorting through boxes in her apartment, Lena found a scarf Daniel had left behind, a deep blue one she had given him their first winter together. The smell of his cologne clung faintly to the fabric, and for a moment, the past came rushing back with brutal clarity. His laughter, the way he used to tuck the scarf around her neck when she forgot hers, the warmth of his hand in hers. Tears blurred her vision. She sat on the floor, clutching the scarf like a lifeline, torn between throwing it away and keeping it hidden in a drawer. In the end, she folded it gently and placed it in a box marked Donations. It was an act of surrender, not to him, but to herself. A few days later, Sarah convinced her to join a local painting class. You need something new, Sarah insisted, something that isn't tied to him. Lena hesitated, but eventually agreed. The first session was awkward. She hadn't painted seriously in years, and her hands felt stiff. But as the brush moved across the canvas, colors blending into shapes, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. There was a man in the class too. Elliot. He was tall, with messy brown hair and a quiet smile that seemed to carry a weight of its own. He wasn't particularly talkative, but when he spoke, it was with a gentleness that made people lean in. "Nice use of color," he said one evening, glancing at her canvas. Lena laughed. "Thanks, I'm just trying not to make a mess." "There's beauty in messes," he replied, and the way he said it made her pause. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was different, refreshing.
Despite these small steps forward, the shadows of the past still followed her. One night, walking home from the class, she found herself passing Daniel's apartment building. The lights were on. A woman's laughter floated down from an open window. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring upward. "He's moved on," she thought bitterly. "Just like that." The tears came hot and fast, and she hated herself for caring. She hated that the sound of another woman's voice could still cut so deeply. At home, she wrote furiously in her journal. "Why does it still hurt when I'm doing everything right? Why does love take seconds to shatter, but years to heal?" She slammed the journal shut and cried herself to sleep. Healing, she realized, wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about learning to live alongside it until it no longer controlled her. Weeks stretched into months. Lena's routine began to feel more solid. Work, painting class, evenings with Sarah, long walks through the city. Slowly, the ache in her chest dulled, no longer consuming her every thought. One rainy evening, Elliot offered her a ride home after class. The city streets shimmered with reflections of neon lights, and the sound of rain tapping on the car roof was strangely soothing. "Do you ever feel like you're starting over?" Lena asked, suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Elliot glanced at her, thoughtful. "All the time," he said. "Sometimes it feels terrifying. Sometimes it feels like a gift." Lena turned to look out the window, her heart thudding. She wasn't ready to call it a gift yet, but maybe, just maybe, she could believe it someday. That night, Lena dreamed of the future, not with Daniel, but with someone faceless, someone undefined. For the first time, her dream wasn't tethered to the past. It was open, uncertain, and strangely hopeful.
It was a Tuesday evening when Lena's phone buzzed again. She almost ignored it, assuming it was Sarah or a work email, but when she glanced at the screen, her breath caught. Daniel. This time, it wasn't a short message. It was longer, more vulnerable. "I saw your post about your painting class. You look happy. I'm glad, but it made me realize how much I miss talking to you. Can we meet? Just for coffee. No pressure." Lena stared at the words, her pulse quickening. For months she had dreaded and secretly longed for this moment. The chance to see him again, to measure how far she'd come, or to risk being pulled back into the gravity of what they had shared. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she closed her phone and went for a walk through the city. The streets were alive with chatter, neon signs, and the smell of roasted chestnuts from a corner stand. Every couple that passed reminded her of what she had lost and what she had survived. By the time she returned home, she had made her decision. They met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one rushed and time seemed to soften. When Lena walked in, Daniel was already there, sitting at a corner table, his hair a little longer, his expression unreadable. "Lena," he said, standing as she approached. His voice carried the same warmth she remembered, and for a brief, painful moment she was transported back to the days when hearing her name from his lips was enough to make her feel whole. They sat. Awkwardness hung between them like fog. "You look good," he said finally. "So do you," she replied, though it wasn't entirely true. There was a tiredness in his eyes, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. They talked about work, mutual friends, the weather, surface-level things, safe things. But eventually, the conversation cracked open. "I've missed this," Daniel admitted, his fingers tightening around his coffee cup. Us. Talking. Laughing. I thought maybe... He trailed off, searching her face. Lena's heart ached. For years she would have given anything to hear those words, but now, sitting across from him, she realized something had shifted. She wasn't the same woman who had walked out of his apartment that night, broken and lost. "Daniel," she said gently, "I'll always care about you, but we're not those people anymore, and I don't think we can be again." His eyes flickered with pain, but also with understanding. He nodded slowly. "I guess you knew I'd say that. I just needed to hear it." They finished their coffee in silence. When they parted ways outside, there was no embrace, no lingering glance. Just a quiet, mutual farewell. For the first time, Lena felt truly free. That night, she told Sarah about the meeting. "It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It was sad, yes, but I didn't feel like I was losing something anymore. I felt like I was closing a door that needed to be closed." Sarah smiled knowingly. "That's not just healing, Lena. That's growth." In the weeks that followed, Lena threw herself into her painting with renewed energy. Her canvases grew bolder, brighter, as if each brushstroke was a declaration of her resilience. Elliot noticed. "You're different lately," he remarked one evening after class. "Different how?" she asked. "Like you're not painting from pain anymore. You're painting from possibility." Lena laughed softly, shaking her head. "Maybe I finally believe there's life after heartbreak." Elliot smiled, but didn't push further. He didn't need to. One night, Lena stayed late in the studio, finishing a piece that had consumed her for weeks. It was abstract, swirling colors of blue, gold, and crimson, chaotic, yet strangely harmonious. She stepped back, staring at it, realizing it wasn't just a painting, it was her story. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Daniel. It was an email from the local gallery. They had seen her work on social media and wanted to feature her in a group exhibition. Lena's hands trembled as she read the words. It felt like the universe was answering her unspoken question. Who am I without him? The answer was finally clear. She was Lena, an artist, a friend, a woman who had survived love and loss and who was no longer defined by either.
The night of the gallery exhibition arrived with a sharp chill in the air. Lena stood in front of the tall glass doors, her reflection staring back at her, layered over the warm glow of the space inside. People in coats and scarves streamed past her, laughing, holding hands, sipping coffee. For a moment, doubt gripped her. What if no one understands my work? What if I don't belong here? But then Sarah appeared at her side, radiant and steady as always. "You ready?" she asked, squeezing Lena's arm. Lena took a deep breath. "Yes," she whispered, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Inside, the gallery buzzed with quiet conversations and the soft clink of glasses. Lena's paintings hung on white walls, the colors alive under the lights. People paused, leaned closer, tilted their heads thoughtfully. It was surreal, like watching strangers walk through the corridors of her own heart. One painting in particular drew attention, the swirling blue, gold, and crimson canvas she had finished weeks ago. Someone murmured, "It feels like pain, transforming into something beautiful." Lena felt her throat tighten. That was exactly what it was. Halfway through the evening, Elliot approached, a faint smile on his face. "Congratulations, your work belongs here." "Thank you," Lena replied. She hesitated, then added, "I wasn't sure I did." "You do," he said, simply.
His words carried no agenda, no expectation, just truth. Lena smiled. It wasn't love, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was connection, friendship, possibility, and that was enough. Later, Sarah pulled her aside, her eyes shining with pride. Do you realize what you've done? You turned your heartbreak into art, into strength. That's rare, Lena. That's powerful. Lena glanced around the gallery, the laughter, the curiosity, the life unfolding all around her. For the first time, she didn't feel like a ghost wandering through her own story. She felt present, real, whole. When the evening wound down and the gallery emptied, Lena stepped outside. The city air was cold, but it felt fresh, like a clean slate. She walked slowly, savoring the quiet. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, half expecting Daniel's name, but it was Sarah, texting from just a few steps away. Proud of you. Don't forget this feeling. It's yours now. Lena smiled, tears stinging her eyes. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and looked up at the night sky, dotted with stars barely visible through the city haze. For months, she had believed her story ended when Daniel walked away. But now she understood endings were just disguised beginnings. She wasn't the same Lena who had clutched a scarf on her apartment floor drowning in grief. She was someone new, shaped by loss, yes, but not defined by it. Someone braver, stronger, softer, and infinitely more alive. With steady steps, she walked into the night, the future stretching before her not as a void, but as a canvas waiting for color. And this time, the brush was firmly in her hand.